My name isn't really important, so for this story, you can just call me Ryan. I'm 26, and I work a pretty normal office job. Nothing exciting. Most of my days follow the same pattern. I wake up early, go to work, come home tired, and then sometime in the evening, I head to the gym. It's been part of my routine for almost 3 years now. Honestly, the gym is the one place where my mind feels quiet. No emails, no phone calls, just weights, music in my headphones, and a simple goal to finish my workout. The gym I go to isn't huge, but it's open late, which is why I like it. Most people prefer going in the afternoon, around 5 or 6 when it's busy and loud. I'm the opposite. I usually show up close to closing time, sometimes around 10 at night. By then the place is almost empty. A few regulars here and there, the sound of plates clinking, and the low hum of the air conditioner running above the ceiling. It's peaceful in a strange way. After going there for so long, you start recognizing people even if you never talk to them. There's the older guy who does nothing but treadmill walking every night. There's a couple who lift together and argue quietly between sets. And then there are people like me who keep to themselves and just finish their routine before heading home. We don't speak much, but we nod at each other sometimes. It's that silent understanding that we all belong there. About 2 months ago, I started noticing someone new. At first, it didn't feel unusual. New people join gyms all the time, but this guy stood out in a way I couldn't really explain. The first night I saw him, he was sitting on a chest press machine across the room, not using it, just sitting there with his elbows on his knees, staring forward like he was thinking about something. I didn't pay much attention at first. People rest between sets all the time, but later, when I looked over again, the machine still hadn't moved. The weight stack hadn't lifted once. He was in the exact same position, just quietly sitting there. The second night, I noticed him again. This time, I was doing dumbbell presses in front of the long wall mirror. Between sets, I usually glance up at my form in the reflection. That's when I saw him again, sitting on a different machine behind me. Same posture, same stillness. And for a brief second, it looked like he was watching me through the mirror. When our eyes met in the reflection, he quickly looked down at the floor. I remember thinking it was a little awkward, but not scary. Maybe he was new to lifting and didn't know what to do yet. Or maybe he was just tired. Either way, it wasn't really my business. But over the next few days, I started noticing something else. No matter what time I arrived, he was already there. And no matter where I moved in the gym, he somehow ended up on a machine nearby. Not working out, not lifting, just sitting there quietly. The strange part was that he never spoke to anyone. Not the staff, not the other members, not even a quick hello. He would just sit, look around the room slowly, and every once in a while, his eyes would land on me. When that happened, he'd look away almost immediately, like he didn't want to be caught. At first, I told myself I was probably overthinking it. Gyms are full of awkward people. Some guys are shy. Some people just like observing before starting their workout. Still, I couldn't shake the small feeling in my chest whenever I noticed him again. One night, while I was re-racking my weights, I glanced up at the mirror like usual, and there he was again. Same machine, same position, looking straight at me. That was the first moment I started to feel something was a little off. At the time, I tried not to think too much about it. Gyms are weird places if you really pay attention. People stare without realizing it. Some guys just sit around between sets forever. Some people look awkward because they're new and don't know what machine to use. I've seen all kinds of strange habits there, so I convinced myself it probably meant nothing. Just another quiet guy who didn't talk much. But the next few nights made it harder to ignore. Once you start noticing someone, your brain keeps checking for them without you meaning to. And every single time I looked around the room, he was somewhere nearby. Not close enough to talk, but close enough that I could see him. Sitting on a machine, leaning forward slightly, watching the room, and almost every time, he ended up watching me. Not in a loud, obvious way. It was more subtle than that. I would be doing a set, then glance up at the mirror, and for half a second, I'd catch his reflection behind me. The moment our eyes met, he'd drop his gaze or pretend to look somewhere else, like he didn't want me to realize he had been looking. It sounds small when I say it like that, but after it happens 5 or 6 times in the same week, you start to feel it. That little uncomfortable pressure in your chest. One night, I was finishing a set of incline presses when I noticed something strange again. The gym was quiet that evening, quieter than usual. Only a few people were there, scattered around the room. The music from the speakers was low, just some slow background playlist the staff always played near closing time. I sat up on the bench and wiped sweat from my face. When I looked up toward the mirror wall, I saw him again, same machine as before, except this time, he wasn't pretending to look somewhere else. He was just staring, not angry, not smiling, just watching me in a way that felt too focused, too still. I held the eye contact for a second longer than I meant to, almost out of curiosity. And that's when he slowly looked down at the floor, like someone turning off a switch. It was such a small movement, but it made the moment feel awkward in a strange way. I grabbed my towel and stood up, telling myself it didn't matter. Still, I finished my workout a little faster that night. A few days later, something else happened. I had just finished deadlifts and walked over to refill my water bottle. The fountain sits around the corner near the locker rooms in a narrow hallway that always feels slightly darker than the rest of the gym. The overhead lights buzz faintly there, and the sound of the main floor gets quieter once you turn the corner. When I stepped into the hallway, I slowed down. He was already standing at the fountain, not drinking, not moving, just standing there, facing the wall, like he had been thinking about something. When he noticed me approaching, he shifted to the side to let me through. "Thanks," I muttered automatically. He didn't answer. I bent down to fill my bottle, and for some reason, the silence felt heavier than it should have. Usually someone would cough, shuffle their feet, check their phone, something normal like that. But he just stood there, completely still. When I finished and straightened up, he was looking at me again, not directly into my eyes, more like at the space near my face. His expression didn't change. Then he turned and walked back toward the gym floor without saying a word. The whole thing lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it left a strange feeling behind. Like a conversation had almost happened, but never started. Later that same night, I went into the locker room to grab my bag. The locker room was nearly empty. One of the showers was dripping somewhere in the back, making that slow, hollow tapping sound against the tile. The fluorescent lights above the lockers flickered once before settling again. I opened my locker and started changing my shoes. That's when I felt it. That weird little feeling people talk about. The one where you know someone is behind you even before you turn around. At first I ignored it. I kept tying my laces, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the feeling didn't go away. So I looked up, and there he was, standing near the far row of lockers. I hadn't heard the door open. I hadn't heard footsteps. Somehow, he had entered the room without making any sound at all. For a moment, we both just stood there. His head tilted slightly in my direction, like he had been watching me longer than I realized. His face looked calm, almost blank, but there was something about his eyes that made the room feel colder than it actually was. Then, slowly, he opened one of the lockers beside him. The metal door creaked softly, like everything was normal. I grabbed my bag a little quicker than usual and walked out without saying anything. I could still feel his presence behind me, even after I stepped back onto the gym floor. I tried to finish my workout after that, but my focus was gone. My eyes kept drifting toward the mirrors, half expecting to see him somewhere behind me again. Eventually, I decided to call it a night. I was putting my last plate back on the rack when I heard a voice behind me. "Good session tonight." It caught me off guard. I turned around and saw him standing a few feet away. Up close, he looked slightly older than I had first thought. Thin face, dark circles under his eyes. He gave a small, polite smile that didn't quite look natural. Thanks," I said. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he nodded once, like we had just finished a completely normal conversation. And as he turned to walk away, he said something that made my stomach tighten a little. "See you tomorrow, Ryan." "What?" "My name." He said it so casually, like he had known it for weeks. But the strange part was that I had never told him. For a moment, I just stood there, holding the weight plate, staring at the spot where he had been standing a few seconds earlier. My brain kept trying to solve it like a small puzzle. Maybe he heard someone say my name. Maybe the guy at the front desk said it when I walked in. Or maybe I had said it during a phone call while resting between sets. Those were the kinds of explanations I tried to give myself while I packed my bag that night. Still, none of them felt right. The gym wasn't a place where people used names much. Most of us didn't even talk. It was just nods, quick smiles, sometimes someone asking, "You done with this bench?" And that was it. I had never had a full conversation with that guy. In fact, the only words he had ever spoken to me were the ones he said right before walking away. "See you tomorrow, Ryan." The way he said it kept replaying in my head all the way home. Not loud, not friendly either, just calm, like he already knew I would be there. The next evening, when I arrived at the gym, something strange happened without me realizing it at first. The moment I stepped inside, my eyes started scanning the room automatically. It was almost like my brain had decided to look for him before I even started my workout. I checked the mirrors, the machines, the rows of benches, and there he was, sitting on a leg press machine near the back wall, the same still posture, elbows resting on his knees, head slightly lowered like he was deep in thought. Except when I walked further inside and glanced at the mirror wall, I noticed his eyes lift slowly toward my direction. He saw me come in. I looked away quickly and headed toward the dumbbells like I normally would. Part of me felt a little stupid for caring so much about some quiet guy in a gym. People are weird everywhere. It didn't mean anything, but that small knot of tension in my stomach was still there while I started my warm-up. For the first 15 minutes, nothing unusual happened. I put on my headphones, ran through a few sets, tried to focus on my form the way I usually did. The music helped a little. The familiar rhythm of lifting, resting, lifting again made the gym feel normal. Then during one of my rest periods, I looked up at the mirror again. He had moved. Now he was sitting on a bench, much closer to the dumbbell rack. Close enough that if he stood up and walked a few steps, he'd be right beside the area where I was lifting. Again, he wasn't using anything. No weights in his hands, no movement from the machines, just sitting there quietly with that same distant expression. The moment our reflections met, his eyes dropped again. At that point, it started feeling less like coincidence and more like a strange pattern repeating itself. Every time I changed locations in the gym, he somehow ended up somewhere nearby after a few minutes. Not directly beside me, not in a way you could easily call out, just close enough to always be inside my peripheral vision. I tried to ignore it and continued my workout, but my focus wasn't there anymore. Instead of thinking about my sets, I kept catching myself checking the mirrors every couple of seconds. After about half an hour, I decided to switch areas completely and move to the squat rack on the far side of the room. Usually, only the more serious lifters used that section, so it was quieter there. For a while it worked. I finished 2 sets of squats without noticing him at all. My breathing slowed down, and for a moment I thought maybe he had finally left. Then I stepped back from the rack and glanced at the mirror. He was standing behind the cable machines, about 20 feet away, watching again. This time, he didn't look away immediately. He held the eye contact for a second longer than usual, almost like he was curious to see if I would react. That was the moment the discomfort turned into something heavier. Not panic exactly, just the kind of awareness you feel when you realize someone has been paying attention to you longer than you realized. I finished the rest of my workout faster than usual that night. While putting the plates back on the rack, I kept telling myself the same thing over and over. It's nothing. He's just another awkward gym guy. But when I walked toward the exit, I noticed something else that stuck with me. The entrance doors were directly in front of the front desk, and beside them was the little scanner where everyone taps their membership card to enter. Every time someone opens the door, it makes a quick electronic beep. I've heard that sound hundreds of times, but standing there near the exit, something clicked in my mind. I couldn't remember ever hearing that beep when he walked in. At first, I brushed the thought away. Maybe he came in when I was wearing headphones. Maybe I was already deep into my workout when he arrived. But that small question stayed in my mind the entire drive home. The next night, when I came back to the gym, I decided to do something a little different. Instead of heading straight inside, I slowed down near the entrance and pretended to check my phone. From that spot, you could clearly see the door scanner and hear it whenever someone used it. I stood there for a minute or two, watching people come and go. Beep. A guy walked in carrying a gym bag. Beep. A woman tapped her phone on the scanner and pushed the door open. Normal. I eventually walked inside myself and started my workout. About 20 minutes later, I heard movement near the mirrors and glanced up. He was there again, sitting on the same machine near the back wall like always. And the strange part, I never heard the door open. I never heard the scanner beep. He was just suddenly inside the gym again. That realization sent a slow, uncomfortable chill down my back. Because if he hadn't used the entrance like everyone else, then how exactly had he been getting inside the building every night? That question didn't leave me alone after that. It wasn't something dramatic that kept me awake or anything like that, but it stayed somewhere in the back of my head, like a quiet itch you keep noticing when things get silent. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to small things I had never cared about before. The front door, the scanner, the sound it made when someone walked in. Every single person who entered the gym had to tap a card or phone, and the scanner always made the same short electronic beep. It was such a small sound that most people ignored it, but once you started noticing it, you realized how constant it was. Beep, door opens, someone walks in. It's simple, predictable. That's how the gym worked. And yet, somehow, every single night I came in, that guy was already inside before I arrived. I never saw him enter, never heard the scanner beep for him, never saw him speaking to the staff. He was just there, like a piece of furniture that had always been part of the room. After that realization, the gym stopped feeling like the same place to me. It used to be somewhere I could turn my brain off for an hour. I would come in, lift, listen to music, and go home. But now, there was always a part of my attention drifting around the room. Even when I tried focusing on my sets, I'd catch myself looking at the mirrors or scanning the machines just to see where he was. And the strange thing was that he never tried to hide it. He wasn't sneaking around or doing anything obvious. He just sat there most nights, leaning forward slightly, his eyes slowly moving across the room like he was studying everything. Sometimes, when I accidentally caught his reflection looking in my direction, he would glance away, but not quickly, not nervously, more like someone who already knew they had been seen and didn't really care. A few nights later, I decided to try something different. Instead of coming late like I always did, I went earlier in the evening. I thought maybe the timing would change things. The gym was busier at that hour, people talking, music louder, machines constantly moving. It felt normal again for a little while. I actually went almost 20 minutes without thinking about him, which was the longest stretch in days. But eventually, I looked toward the mirror wall out of habit, and there he was again, sitting on a machine near the back of the room, exactly the way he always did. The same posture, the same quiet presence. And when I saw him there, something in my chest dropped slightly, because it meant one thing very clearly. It didn't matter what time I came. Somehow, he always ended up there. That night, I tried to ignore him completely. I stayed focused on my workout and kept my eyes away from the mirrors whenever possible. It almost worked. Almost. But every now and then, I would feel that strange awareness again, like someone's attention resting somewhere on the back of your neck. When I finally finished and started heading toward the exit, I saw him standing near the entrance doors. He wasn't leaving though. He was just standing there, looking out into the dark parking lot. As I walked past him, he spoke quietly, without turning his head. His voice was calm, like he was simply commenting on the weather. "You changed your time." That was all he said. I stopped walking for a second without meaning to. The way he said it made it clear he wasn't guessing. He had noticed the change. Not just that I was there, but when I arrived compared to before. I didn't respond. I just walked out and drove home. But that sentence stayed with me the rest of the night. By that point, I had already decided I was going to cancel my membership soon. Not because of anything dramatic, but because the whole situation had started feeling uncomfortable in a way I couldn't fully explain. Still, I had a couple of weeks left on my membership, so I kept going. The final night I went there happened almost by accident. I had stayed late at work that day, and by the time I drove to the gym, it was already close to closing time. The parking lot was mostly empty when I pulled in. Inside the building, Only a few people were still there, finishing their workouts. It felt quiet in that familiar late-night way again. I remember thinking maybe the whole thing would feel normal tonight. Maybe I would finish my workout, go home, and the strange feeling would finally fade. For the first half hour, everything actually felt peaceful. I moved slowly through my sets, taking longer breaks than usual. The staff member at the front desk looked bored and tired, leaning back in his chair and staring at his phone. One by one, the other members packed up and left. Each time the door opened, the scanner made that short beep, and the quiet night air slipped inside for a moment before the door closed again. Eventually, it was just me and the staff guy left in the building. A few minutes later, he walked across the gym floor and told me they were about to close. I said I only needed a couple more minutes. He nodded and went back toward the front area. After that, the gym became extremely quiet. Not the normal quiet I was used to, but the kind that makes every little sound noticeable. The air vents humming in the ceiling, the faint creak of metal from somewhere in the room. Even my own footsteps sounded louder than usual on the rubber flooring. I finished my last set and started putting the plates back onto the rack. That's when I heard something behind me. It was a small metallic sound, like a weight plate touching another plate somewhere across the room. I looked up toward the mirrors automatically. The front of the gym was empty. The staff member wasn't at the desk anymore. For a second, I thought maybe he had gone into the office. Then I heard the sound again. This time, it was clearer. Metal shifting against metal. Slowly, I turned around, and that's when I saw him. He was standing near the squat rack on the far side of the gym floor, not sitting like usual, not pretending to look away, just standing there, completely still, facing me. The lights in that part of the building had already dimmed for closing, which made the shadows deeper around him. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Something about the moment felt different from every other time I had seen him there. There was no pretending now, no looking away through the mirrors. He was simply there, watching openly. "You almost stopped coming," he said quietly. His voice echoed slightly in the empty room. I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up my bag slowly and started walking toward the exit. I wasn't running or panicking, but I could feel my heartbeat rising in that uncomfortable way when your instincts are telling you to leave a place quickly. As I passed the mirrors, I noticed he hadn't moved at all. He was still standing exactly where I first saw him. I pushed open the front door and stepped outside into the cool night air. The sudden quiet of the parking lot felt strange after the silence inside. When I reached my car, I glanced back at the building without really thinking about it. Through the dark windows, I could still see the inside of the gym. Most of the lights were off now, but the shape of someone standing among the machines was still visible. Completely still, like he had been there the entire time. That was the last night I ever went to that gym. The end.